On our sermon series and adult, this isn't an emotional talk today, but adult forum subject, we're talking today about finding meaning in work. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I had something on my bulletin board that, and I think it was Albert Camus that quoted this, that I won't be able to remember the whole thing because it just occurred to me now, but without meaning in your work, without soul in your work, life withers and dies. We spend so much time at work that boy, it better be meaningful. So on our panel today, we have Angela Kramer, Joyce Walker, and Elizabeth Cozine. Okay. And what we're going to do today, I'm going to let them kind of begin by introducing themselves, but I have a series of questions, but we're going to talk about from these three perspectives, finding meaning in work. So what I'd like each of you to do, beginning with whoever wants to begin, is to introduce yourself and just say what you do for a living outside of, keeping a house and family and all those things.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Cozine. I know I've met most of you. I've been a Zumbro member for about 7 years. My husband, Dan, who's sitting right here, and I usually sit in the front row of the 1030 church with our 3 children who are fairly disruptive. So you might have recognize us from that. But my work is, I'm a family doctor. I work in the Baldwin building here downtown. I did all of my training here in Rochester. I went to medical school and residency at Mayo, and then for the past 3 years, I've been working in the Mayo Clinic Health System in Zumbro, which is actually my hometown, which is a really interesting setup. But as of July of this year, I transitioned to the Baldwin building, and I'm in the family medicine practice there. So I'll have a lot to say about how I find meaning.
My name is Joyce Walker, and I have been a real estate agent for 32 years in 3 different states. I was crazy enough to start over 3 times, and if anybody is self-employed, that's a very scary thing. I sold in Colorado, in Nevada, and then for the last 14 years in Rochester at Edina Realty. And we'll talk more about that later. I've handed out a little handout that we'll talk about too.
All right, I'm Angela Kramer. My husband Carl and I have been Zumbro members for 11 years now. We have 3 boys, Andrew, Marcus, and Lucas. They're 17, 15, and 12. So the older 2 are over at Faith Formation working with the little ones, which is kind of fun. I work in management engineering and internal consulting at Mayo Clinic. And basically how I define that is we work with multidisciplinary teams on problems that we haven't yet solved or things that could be better at the clinic. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Maybe we'll talk about some project examples, but my work is all project work, not a frontline caregiver. So it's very interesting for us to think about how we find meaning in our work when it's a little bit more removed. So.
Thank you. So, Angela, let's go to you. What is it in your work that you find meaningful?
Oh, well, so it's such a popular topic right now, and I think, we're talking about gratitude at church right now, and I think that, it's one of those things we were just talking, you spend so much time at your work, you really need to think about, you're not just, when we think about our department, we have a lot of engineers in our department. One person recently said, the work that we do is not making widgets shinier. It's, we're solving a problem. We're making a patient experience better. So, one project example that I worked on in the last few years was creating a program around patients with feeding tubes at Mayo Clinic. So we did a really great job of putting feeding tubes in for patients when they couldn't meet their nutrition needs orally. But we hadn't really been as purposeful as we could have been about having conversations with those patients about that decision and how that was really something that they wanted as part of their plan of care and what that meant for their life when they had that tube in their daily life. So we work with multidisciplinary teams, so in that example it was physicians, it was nurses, it was dietitians, it was surgeons, it was clinical assistance, scheduling appointments, really understanding what is it that those patients need and how can we wrap that care around them. So when we talk about the fact that we're problem solvers, we kind of translate that more into we're making the patient experience better at Mayo Clinic, even though we're not direct caregivers. So.
I'm afraid I'm going to drop this thing. I've found meaning in my work over the last 32 years in a variety of ways. First of all, I am constantly challenged to grow and to learn. When you think you've seen every circumstance or dealt with every type of personality, every type of property, and every legal ramification of real estate, then something new pops up. And just a month ago, I had a brand new situation dealing with someone who was a foreign investor and selling a property and having to figure out how to withhold taxes so the IRS could get them before they ran away to their countries. So those types of things. Laws are changing, regulations for realtors. My office changes too. We're right now in the midst of a renovation, I would call it. So I've been evicted from my second floor office, which is totally vacant now, and jammed in a little office that I don't like, so I've learned the challenge of kind of not complaining and just learning to work in a different environment, because I had a pretty sweet place before I had to move. I also see real estate as a people business and an opportunity to serve. I've handed out a list of the 10 top stresses, life stresses, and as I look at those, I have dealt with every one of those in my real estate career. Not me personally, but with people who are going through those. Until last year, I had never dealt with somebody in prison, but finally hit that one. Had to sell the home of a young woman who was in prison on drug charges and needed the money to pay her legal fees. So I also see it as an opportunity to help people navigate the unknown. I was a teacher by training and taught junior high English for 4 years before I came to my senses. And, no, not really. I love teaching, but circumstances led me this direction. But I'm constantly teaching people whether they're selling, their 10th home or whether it's a first-time home buyer. And I love that aspect of my work. The other place where I find meaning is friendships. I have friends from each place, each state where I've sold. Friends in my office, friends that I'm, just friendships I'm developing with new clients now. So that's been a very rewarding thing. And I think the other aspect where I find meaning is encouraging other agents. I've been around for a long time, and we constantly have new agents in our office who just need a little hand-holding or a little encouragement or a little saying, hey, I was there. And if you'll hang in there for 2 years of really hard work, it'll pay off. It'll work for you.
I think there's actually a lot of similarities between my work and Joyce's work. And as I think through, what is it that we're both doing, it's a lot of what I do is guiding people through a lot of these life changes. So in family medicine, there's not a lot of flashy, sexy diagnostic work where I'm coming up with these amazing name for something that's been ailing you for years. It's more like, how do we deal with what's been ailing you for years and how can I guide you through that? And when I was in the dark days of my training, which were long and hard, and I have Dan to thank for helping me get through that, my dad, who's also a family doctor, gave me a quote from Thomas Merton that has really stuck with me and that I now keep on my desk. And I can't quote it directly, but the gist of it is that you struggle over years and years to try to find meaning in your work, but in the end, it's the value of personal relationship that really transforms what you do. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because what I'm doing is taking care of generations of people. I have babies and their parents and their grandparents, and in some cases 4 generations, and I love that. And it's so great to have that relationship across time and space to really help people figure out some of these challenging situations. So I think that's not unique to what I do, but it is where I find the most meaning in what I do, because there's a lot of drudgery in the day in and day out. And so when I have those moments where I'm able to be a part of somebody's life in this longitudinal way, that's where I'm most happy and find that I'm getting most gratification from my work.
Elizabeth, what's a great day for you?
Well, First of all, I'd get out of the house without somebody touching me with sticky hands. Which that happens, I don't know, maybe 50% of the time. And I think a great day for me is where I have multiple mutually satisfying interactions. I think like anything else, a lot of times I give advice and it may not be accepted. And then somebody comes back and, well, I'm not better back. So, well, tell me, let's talk through what you did. And, well, they didn't do anything that we talked about that might be helpful. And so I think there's certainly a lot of scripture that follows along those lines, right? But a good day is when there's a lot of back and forth, and I recognize that it's not just my job to give advice, it's my job to help people navigate the system, but where we've come to some solutions that are mutually acceptable, which is a lot like parenting too.
And Angela? Light bulb.
Okay, this is all confusing to me. A great day at work. It's going to sound very similar to what Elizabeth said, but the work that we do, one of the things we say in our department is we don't do anything alone, and so we work with these teams on these problems, and the hardest part is the discovery. So at the beginning it's feeling very ambiguous. You don't really understand what the root cause of the problem is, and you're investing a lot of time in understanding that. And you'll have these moments where everything just kind of clicks, and the team's kind of coming together and working through it. And so I would say those are really great days when you kind of get to that point where it's not feeling so nebulous and so dark, and you start to kind of have some semblance of where you're going. The other thing would be when you see kind of the results of your work. So you've made all these changes and you actually get to see it in action, or you get to run into someone that's been impacted by that. There's something pretty incredible, and those are fun days.
If you ask any real estate agent what constitutes a good day, they would say, a closing. and granted, those are great. That's when we get our paycheck, and we're not on salary, as you probably know. But there are several things that constitute a good day for me. When I've worked with a buyer for a long time, and all of a sudden they have that aha, we found the house, and we love it, and we're excited about it. That's really a cool day. Another time that I feel I've had a really good day is where I've helped somebody navigate one of those issues on the stress list that I gave you. Particularly when I'm dealing with older people who've lived in their house for 40 to 50 years and suddenly they've got to make a change. And downsizing, going through all the physical ramifications of getting rid of their possessions and moving to a new place where they don't really want to go. If I feel I've helped them, and after it's all done and said, they say, thank you, you really helped me navigate that, that's a good day. I would also say that, responses from first-time home buyers, that's the most fun for me, working with somebody who's never owned a home before. And to see them excited and figure it out and find a home, and to see them at their closing when they've got this awful look of fear about having a mortgage. But, feeling that I've helped them through that makes a really good day.
I think one other thing that I would add for me is I'm thinking and listening. I mentioned those 3 little kids, so I'm in the thick of everybody needs help with basic tasks, so I have to wipe butts and get dressed and all of those things that just require a lot of physical and mental energy. So another good day for me is when I feel like there's been a lot of meaning in my interaction at work, that I don't feel bad that I was away. And there are days when I don't have that, and then I just feel like, well, I was gone all day, and then I came home and everybody's at their most crabby, so I'm not getting good out of anybody. And so those are the hard days. But when I feel like my presence at work was useful to more people, then it's a lot easier for me to be gone.
We got 3 women up here, all have children, some of different ages. How do you balance that meaning in your work balanced with meaning at home?
Gonna ask me? I live all by myself, so I don't have to balance as much. But what I have learned in the years I've been in real estate is that it is very important to have balance. It can be an all-consuming occupation where you're on 24/7 and you never say no to anybody. And I have learned to carve out time for church, for choir, for the Salvation Army Board that I serve on and all those related activities, but more importantly for my kids and grandkids. I have a daughter and son-in-law in town and a darling, and I mean it, they're the best boys. They're 9 and 10, and I have them every Monday. I pick them up from school, and if they have a day off in school, I have them for the whole day, like I did Friday. And then I have their parents for dinner. So that is a time that I carve out, and it's something that I just will not cancel. So that time, plus some time with some friends, I have specific events that I'm always going to be involved in. Choir is one of them, and work is not going to take the place of that. You got it.
I don't know that I necessarily remember what your original question was, but I think it was something to do with balancing being a mom and having work outside the home. And I would say we all wrestle with this a lot, I think, because I grew up in a very traditional, my mom stayed home and she was always there for us, and there was a lot of really wonderful benefits to that. And I don't know if I say this because I hope it's true, but I do believe I'm a better mom because I work. And there's balance either way, I think. Even when my mom stayed home, I mean, that's hard too. You're always there, and I know selfishly I get a lot of positive strokes at work because there are those really good days where you're making a contribution in other ways. And so, yep, it's hard. But I think it's fun for my kids to see me using my skills in another way and making a difference in other people's lives too.
Identity.
And I think for Dan and me, one of the ways we do it is we have a little microeconomy. So we outsource a lot. And we have a full-time nanny who, if you see my kids around, that's not their grandma, that's their nanny. And she is like a third parent, and she really is a third parent. And we really, really couldn't do it without her. And so that when people ask, well, how do you do it all? I said, well, I don't do it all. I don't even do most of it. So you know, she helps keep up the house and the kids and gets them where they need to go and takes them to preschool. They've all gone to Rainbow School here at Zumbro, and frees up a little mental energy for us to do other things that we like to do. And also I say no to a lot of things because there's only so much that I can keep a handle on.
How does your faith inform your work, how you work, what you do, how you deal with problems?
Am I starting because I've got the microphone up there? Okay, faith. I think the first thing I would say about my faith and my work, or helping me find meaning in my work, is that my faith tells me people matter. They matter a lot more than a paycheck. They matter more than finding the best home in Rochester or the most expensive home for a client. The people, each one of them comes with a different set of circumstances, their different ages, different needs, different personalities. And I've had to learn a lot about psychology in the years that I've worked. I also feel like my faith helps me find meaning in my work because the scripture tells us to utilize our gifts, and that was in the scripture reading this morning. And I believe God has given me specific gifts: organization, teaching abilities, the ability to relate to people in different circumstances, and it's important for me to use those in my work. And then another aspect of my faith, I think my faith has taught me to be generous. And I'm in an occupation where I have been compensated well, and it's given me opportunities to give to other people and other organizations, and my time too. So, and I gladly do that because our faith tells us that generosity is really important. And finally, gratitude, since that's our theme right now. I am so grateful for the work I've been in. It's just been, I think I have the best job. You? of anybody here because of all of the opportunities it's given me.
So I guess when I was reflecting on this one too, I've had the opportunity to do some mission work with some of our youth here at church, and they focus a lot on God's work, our hands. And I think that's not, it translates really well for our youth, because I think oftentimes kids don't always feel like they're as helpful. And so when they get to go on those trips and have those opportunities, they get to see that. And we translate that too. It's not just that we cleaned up garbage today, or we cleared, my oldest 1 year down in the Quad Cities cleared out a house that was full of trash because it was a former crack house, and it was full of animal feces, and it was horrible. But they were thinking about their work and how they were cleaning up this home for this new young couple that had bought the house. And they weren't just thinking about the fact that they were cleaning up all this trash out of this house. They were getting this home ready for this new family. And I think I tend to do that in my work too. The work that we do at Mayo Clinic, it's so easy to think about translating your purpose and of your work into how you're helping others. We talk a lot about providing hope and healing. So I'm not a physician, I'm not a nurse, but the work that I'm doing, I can translate that into what am I doing to help these people that are flying from the other side of the world for hope and healing. So, one example, I'm not getting to work on this project right now, but somebody that I work with at the clinic is actually getting to work on a new novel therapy that's a new final option for lymphoma patients that has never existed before. Well, they didn't discover it, they didn't do the clinical trials, but they're now working on making sure operationally when that first patient comes in, they can move through our process and it'll be as smooth as possible. And there's something really incredible to think about the fact that I'm not just making sure we can schedule an appointment, or it's really, we're helping to provide this new therapy for patients. So it's really in how you think about it, and translating, what it is that you're actually doing and the difference that it's making, and that helps a lot.
I'm not sure I have anything particularly profound, but I think it is pretty Lutheran. But I see my work as a calling, and I think I'm called to do this work. And there are days that I'm pretty ambivalent about the work itself, but that what I get out of the work is I'm able to do it. And since I am able to do it, I probably should.
Anything more in that?
About faith or about being
faith.
Lutheran?
Well, yeah, that's a good transition.
I've only been a Lutheran for 12 years. But
He's a baby.
Yeah, I'm a baby. But I have found tremendous freedom here to think and ask questions, and that's taken a huge load off me in my work, because I'm finally able to be me. I've been in very, very conservative churches and was married to a very conservative minister for a long time, and so being in a Lutheran environment has been very freeing for me. But I would say, as far as being a Lutheran helped, I've worked with a lot of you, so yes, I would say in that regard, you've been great to me, so thank you for the opportunity.
Beyond networking.
I can just talk about a couple of things that I get out of being a member of Zumbro.
Yeah.
I think it gives me really good perspective, especially when, I remember particularly, was it last fall we were doing the Compassion Sermon Series, and I had just had a great conversation afterwards with Pastor Lisa about compassion fatigue. I've got to spend all my whole day being compassionate. Sometimes I just don't feel like it. And so I find it a really good reminder and a good reset to my week that I can sit here surrounded by these people of multiple generations who I know are looking out for me and for my family, and engaged in what we're doing, and know that this is kind of a touch point of a place to frame what I'm doing day in and day out.
So I'm independent. I work from home as a textile artist, and I often find a lot of what you're saying absent in my work. I don't interact with people during the day, so I can't share or assist. I make stuff, which I guess is good, and maybe sometimes that brings joy to people, I guess that's good. But I think some of these things might be more difficult for people that work from home, because it isn't immediately obvious to me that my faith informs my work, or that what I do is meaningful to anybody outside of my own house. It's certainly not meaningful financially. So another question, has there been somebody, or many people, or an organization that has influenced you to find meaning? Has there been somebody that influenced you to choose your profession?
I would say my dad influenced me to choose my first profession, teaching. And if you're in my age bracket, you probably heard the same thing. Get a teaching credential, because if your husband dies, does something awful, you can
Fall
support
back
yourself.
on
You can
it.
always fall back on teaching. But I learned from Dad the value of working hard. And even as a kid, on Friday afternoons, we had to come home from school and dust, because that was my mother's cleaning day and she left the dusting for us. My dad would come home and he'd do the white glove treatment. And if he found the top of the piano still had some dust on it, he'd say, "Are you proud of that? Did you really do your best at dusting?" And of course it meant a redo. But I also learned something on the negative side from my dad. He was in a job that I think he hated. He worked for a company that dealt with workmen's compensation claims, and he had to go to court and represent companies that had claims against them. It was very stressful. His office was a very stressful environment. He came home exhausted and just very unhappy. He had a couple of heart attacks right in his office. Hello. But he would not change, because he had 4 kids to support, I'm sure, and he was afraid of change. So I learned, if you're not in a job that you love, get out of it. Then there's one other person who really influenced me. I don't know if any of you in medicine have ever heard the name Dr. Arthur Ammon, or Ammon is the way he pronounced it. But I got acquainted with him when I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was a pioneer in addressing pediatric AIDS. And he was the most humble man, the most brilliant man. And it was the kids that he worked with and the patients, the parents, that were so important to him. And he also shared those gifts in retirement. I mean, he's in his 80s now, and he's still working on an organization to relieve global pediatric AIDS. And that's he's just a giver. And that was a really good model for me.
Well, I might be tying together 2 themes here. Mine will be my dad, who happened to be a small-town family medicine physician, and he worked very hard, but he loved his work. So, but the running joke at our house was, if my dad was actually home, before we'd answer the phone, we'd say, "Dad, are you here?" Because everyone just called the house, and so there was no line at all between work and home. And it was very interesting to watch that. But at the same time, he worked very hard, but he loved his work. He knew he was making a difference, and there was something about that I think, I'm the oldest of 5, and we all watched that. Yep, he missed out on an awful lot of our, growing up. Did he make it to all of our school events and things? No. But we knew that he loved his work and that it made a difference. And I would say that all 5 of us, really translate that into our work. One of us is a podiatrist, another is a teacher, another is an office assistant, another is a farmer. But we can all talk about how we're maybe feeding the world, or we're helping people being able to walk. He did something to help kind of infuse in us that hard work is very important, but most importantly, you have to love what you're doing. And he would say the same thing as we were each kind of navigating our careers. It was always, no matter what it is, you have to make sure you love it, because you're going to be doing it a long time. So.
Yeah, I would echo my parents as a big influence. I mentioned my dad's a family doc too. My mom stayed home with us, but was a professional volunteer and really ran the show. And they taught us the importance of being involved in your community and the importance of being available. And so there was always the same routine with the phone, and which is kind of how we've run our life too, in that I try to be available as much as I can, and then have a backup plan if I'm not available. And then I would also echo that some of the people who've really influenced me are sitting right here. Ruth Johnson is a longtime family friend, has known me since I was a little girl, a baby, before I was born. And I watched her career, and when she and Phil were a part of my life growing up, we would sit around and talk and have these really interesting conversations and important conversations, and think about where can you find interest and stimulation, and surround yourself with people who are inspiring to you. And then my husband, who is my right hand. 2 hands, both hands. And we bounce these ideas off of each other, and what are we trying to accomplish over the long run, and working together to do that. Does that answer it?
Yeah, well, how about, all of you mentioned your fathers. How did your mothers influence your work?
My mother insisted that we all take college calculus. That was her. She read some study that women who take a full year of college calculus earn on par with men in their fields.
Show of hands.
Calculus. Here I am. No, my mother really just encouraged us to. The only rule in my house was that my parents really value education, and the rule was we all had to get a 4-year college degree, but then we could do whatever we wanted. And my brother became a police officer, so he got his 4-year degree, and then he had to go back to tech school to get his police certification, and now he's an investigator. So they encouraged us to use our skills and to do what we wanted within reason.
Well, I'm from a different generation. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, but she'd had a career in public health nursing before she got married. Once she had kids, she stayed at home. And that was kind of the model I saw. But I remember when I was a teenager, she went back and took some refresher courses, and she went back to work. It lasted about 6 months because my dad was so unhappy that dinner was not on the table and the kids were not supervised, and she quit. And I saw tremendous unhappiness. So she spoke to me in the sense that I thought it was okay to have a career, and I have been able to combine that with kids and with other commitments and obligations.
So my mom, I mentioned she was a stay-at-home mom. I was the first person in her family to go to college, and that was very important to her. So just like you're saying, all 5 of us went to college and got that 4-year degree, and that was very important to her. Everything that she did felt like it was getting us ready to be able to be successful in college. But goodness, my mom was there for everything because my dad was hardly there for anything. So while I talk about my dad being very influential in my career and making sure it was something that I truly loved, my mom was the one that was always there getting me ready for that next step, right? So she was the one, making sure we were going to, our 4-H meetings and selecting projects for the fair and learning, the value of breaking those down and getting everything ready for the fair. She was the one there helping me prep for my first job interview. She was the one that was there when maybe things weren't going so great and kind of helping me, work through things that maybe aren't hard or aren't easy. And goodness, you use that every single day because as we talked about earlier, not every day is great. And so you need to kind of have that resiliency. And she was always the one that was there, thinking through, well, this isn't the end of the world. Is this going to matter in 5 years from now? There's all kinds of things she said to me every single day that are running through the back of my mind. So absolutely, I'm glad you asked that question.
An interesting point. My dad was an architect and very ambitious in his field. He was successful. And in work, every time I saw my dad, and I think my siblings would agree, he would say, well, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? What's your next step? Because it was never enough. But kind of on the opposite side of that, when we went to college, which I think was assumed that we would do. My dad said to me, I'm sending you to college, not for work, but so that you can learn to think. Which is kind of a luxury now, because college is so expensive, that if there isn't a career at the end of it, I don't think people necessarily see the value in that, like they did in the early 70s. Let's see. Here's a good question. What would you tell young people? I don't know how young. What would you tell young people, maybe who are trying to think about a career or planning their life, because we ask young people to plan their life in their senior year of high school now, about choosing a career, and maybe tie into that, choosing a career, but also choosing a career with faith informing that decision.
I can answer at least part of this. I do work with, well, first of all, I am young, I know that. But I work with people who are even younger than I am on a regular basis, because I work with medical students and residents and young people who are considering a career in medicine. And the question I get the most is the question about balance, especially when people find out that I've been in a committed relationship for a long time and I have children. So they always want to, how did you do it? And the main thing that I tell people is, my one particular line is, choose your partner really wisely. And, but beyond that, I think surround yourself with people who are supportive to you. And I think that can come from your faith community, and it is one of the ways that I've chosen to do that. But namely, it's not a solo show, and working through having people who can back you up is really key. And when I was going through my early years, that was my parents really encouraging me. And then by the time Dan and I got married, he put me through medical school and put me through residency, and now I'm putting him through graduate school. And so the things it's a back and forth, and I think realizing that it's a team sport.
I've had a lot of opportunity to think about this week, because I had conversations with two of my grandkids. One is a junior in accounting at University of Mississippi, and she is acing everything. She's very focused. She wants to get her CPA, she knows she wants to work for a firm in Dallas, and on we go. But I had a good conversation with her because she's all of a sudden she has an opportunity to be an intern this coming summer with a big firm. And as she's learned more about the lifestyle, she said, Grandma, that's not what I want. I want to get married someday and have kids, and I want to work, but I want to be able to balance it. So she's beginning to rethink the big firm and all the status. And in a conversation with my grandson, who's a freshman at University of Missouri, he really wanted to major in journalism with a minor in politics. But he got parental advice that said, hey, that's not practical. And if you want to get ahead in life, you've got to major in business. He's majoring in business and hating every minute of it. So we had a good conversation. Are you in the place where you should be? And he's thinking about that, unfortunately, and we've always had just a great relationship and able to talk about stuff. And I'll see him at Christmas, and hopefully we can have that conversation again. But I would say to a young person, it is not about status, it's not about the paycheck. It's about whether you love what you do, and also, can you have some balance in your life with that career? Can you be of service in that career? And especially as a Christian, if we don't have opportunities for service through our work, or if our work doesn't give us the opportunity to serve outside, we're really missing the boat.
I have a senior in high school who's actually trying to navigate this right now, is feeling a lot of pressure about it. And it was very interesting. Gosh, the first time he took his ACT exam, they do this little like questionnaire thing, and it was, after a while, it was very interesting. I could almost answer the questions before he did, and it was quick. It was very clear that whatever he ends up doing is going to be something being helpful, and I think his time here at Zumbro has definitely helped him with that, because there's been so many opportunities here for our youth to get involved and find ways that, you know, the work that they do can have meaning and they can be helpful. And so I think that's translated for him very nicely. What he's gonna do, I don't know, but for sure it's going to be something that he knows he's making a difference in helping other people. And it'll be fun to kind of see that. So it's really neat to see that, you know, with your grandchildren, they're actually kind of down that path already and kind of thinking that through. We're in the college selection process right now, and because he doesn't know exactly what he wants to do, the sky's the limit. So it's going to be very fun to see that kind of happen in the next few years. And I feel like in my work, you know, we have a lot of conversations about even people working in our department, you know, what's next? You know, what's that 3 to 5 year plan that people have, and it's really interesting to listen to people talk, because it always is. It's not so much about what's that next step in the ladder, but really where else can I grow my skills and continue to be of use.
Could I add another comment?
No. I'm just kidding.
I know Ian pretty well, so I'm not going to pay attention to her. I've had conversations with my grandkids recently, and these are the ones who live in Missouri. Is this on?
Yeah.
And they said, Grandma, we've decided you're the coolest grandparent. And I said, oh, that's great. Why? Because you're still working. So they said that makes you dress well. You're not in sweats all day. They said you're interacting with younger people and you get life. So that was really a neat comment. I also wanted to throw one other thing out. There is a wonderful 2016 Atlantic Magazine article that's an interview of 2 very conservative people. One is David Brooks, a columnist, and the other is Arthur Brooks, who's an economist and musician. And if you get a chance to look it up, it's called 7 Ways to Find Meaning in Your Work. It is wonderful. And interestingly enough, it hits on the spiritual side of finding meaning in your work as well as joy in what you do.
Speak. It's interesting to me to listen to you, because I've had several distinct and successful careers. I started out with going to graduate school in Scandinavian studies, so useful. So I dropped out because I could see my future, and it wasn't nice. But I did have a teaching career, a successful teaching career. I went on to marketing, and had a very successful global event marketing career, and finally ended up as an artist, which is what I always wanted to be. But that's one of the reasons why, and maybe our economy is such that that flexibility doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. But that's one of the reasons why when kids are so struggling as seniors in high school to say, well, what do I want to be for the rest of my life? It's impossible to decide. They don't know what careers are even going to exist in 10 years, because I didn't know that my middle career, but I didn't know that teaching English as a second language was going to be a career when I was in high school or college even. I didn't know that my particular part of marketing was a career. I didn't know about that career. So I think it's hard to expect high school seniors to.
Well, it's interesting to bring that up, because we did have a car ride home just a few weeks ago where it was, Mom, they'll always need dentists, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm pretty sure they're always going to need dentists. And you could tell there must have been a conversation about artificial intelligence or something at school where they were talking about how careers could become obsolete depending on what you select. And it was, they're always going to need dentists, because dentistry is something he's talked a lot about. I'm like, yeah, I think they're always going to need dentists.
We'll always need someone to cut hair.
Just one other quick comment. I think kids need to understand that they're probably going to change careers several times.
Yeah.
I mean, those of you in medicine probably haven't, but I've been in 3 different careers in my life, and I was only trained to be an English teacher.
Right.
Well, I would actually argue that my career is changing, and that's one of the reasons I'm happy to be working here in Rochester, where I have a lot of opportunities for growth, is because I'm not just going to be stagnant in doing the same day in, day out, seeing patients every 15 minutes, where I have a lot of opportunities here to be a part of some of the more intellectually stimulating stuff when the day-to-day stuff drives me down a little bit. And so I'm already seeing that evolving, and if I keep my mind open to the creative possibilities around me, I can move forward in a different way and kind of reinvent myself every few years.
We went a little over, so I don't know if we have time for questions, but attack these three women if you have questions. Kindly and respectfully attack them. And we will see you next week. Thank you.